Hello ladies and gentlemen, I'm Paul TX14 Walsh and welcome to some more Gran Turismo Sport, a racing game developed by Polyphony Digital and published by Sony Interactive Entertainment for the PlayStation 4. Focusing on the game's online mode, known as Sport Mode, in this episode I take a look at my performance in the second race of the first stage of the 2019 Manufacturer Series season, which is a Group 4 race held at the Kyoto Driving Park, Yamagiwa circuit. With that, let's get racing. Taking a look at the grid then, you'll see that I've qualified second out of 20 participants, all of us being B driver rating drivers. My story for qualifying? I was not too pleased with my final lap of 141.8, considering I was able to achieve a 141.3 in my practice qualifying sessions, but then again that wouldn't have been enough to change for first, but the German Mercedes driver putting in a wonderful 140.9, congratulations to them. But what I was pleased about was the fact that I managed to out-qualify both the Lamborghini and the Nissan GTR in third and fourth respectively. Two very powerful cars in a straight line, and those cars would really be pressing the challenge towards the higher end of the grid I expected from the start of qualifying. So to be in front of those was an absolutely fantastic feeling and something that I now wanted to preserve over the race distance, trying to come home in second. So my race strategy, forget about first entirely. I expected the Mercedes driver just to disappear off into the distance after lap 1 because they seem to have the better race pace, or at least the better one lap pace. And so I would be managing coming all the way home in second by the end. Well, this being a sprint race, 8 laps with low fuel consumption and low tyre wear mean that everyone will be racing from start to end with no pit stops, a single set of racing medium tyres. Now talking about tyre wear, I had to be wary of the fact that on the 6th, 7th and 8th lap, the front right and the rear right tyres would be showing considerable wear, meaning that grip would be weaker on the high speed left-handers, so turns 1 and 6 in particular, while this circuit having a lot of left-handers compared to right-handers, and that would make managing the tyres a key item going into those final laps because there'd be a higher chance of making an unforced error, and that would cost me time and potentially positions. So that's something I did work on over the course of my practice runs going into this race, managing that tyre wear in the final couple of laps and the speed going in. Now one thing I want to point out is that I felt a lot more confident with this track compared to Interlagos previously, simply because this didn't feel as though it was a disjointed track of speed and some corners. Like Interlagos, here it felt as though all 4 sectors flowed into one another, and a mistake in one sector would cost you time in all of the other sectors, so a very consistent high speed on average lap would be better than a lap where you make a mistake in a corner but then try to make it up in the straight. With our car not having as much straight line speed as say the guys behind, that'd be difficult in Interlagos, but here, if we could be consistent, we could get away with it and try to maintain second. So 3, 2, 1, and we're going to be underway now as we shift up into second and gradually tuck in behind the Mercedes, and as we come out of turn 1 you're going to see they're already off, and we look to our rear view mirror seeing the Lamborghini already coming up quite quick behind us in our slipstream. They go a little bit deep into turn 1, which costs them a bit of time here, and it means we're able to just gradually fly our way out of turn 1 and up the hill, going through turns 2 through to 5 and then into 6 at the top of the hill. But as we come over turn 3 here, you'll see that I get a little bit sideways with cold tyres, and that cost me a line going through turn 4 and cost me a lot of speed, and the Lamborghini is now right up my 6 as we go up into turn 6 here at the brow of the hill, and coming down I take the defensive inside line here. I want to make the Lamborghini work for it on cold tyres, so as we go into the corner here you see the Lamborghini falls back a little bit and tucks in behind me, managing their position and making sure not to go off the track, and that means they've got a huge amount of speed going down the hill now towards the chicane at turn 7, so I keep to the right, they come around to the left and they've got in front of me going down to the chicane, so I brake just before the 100 board, they brake a little bit deeper, and then Nissan GTR comes charging through. They fry up on the inside into the chicane and claim third place off of me for the time being. Well done to them, that was a fantastic move. It's a good thing I noticed it at the last moment, because otherwise I would have pulled over and we could have taken one another off the track. So with that, now I had to think, right, I've lost 2 places in the opening lap, but I've got a considerable gap to the guy in 5th. So what do I do for now? Well, for now I just settle down and get into the race, because remember, races are not won if you exclude the Mercedes driver in first place and just talk about the battle for second. Races are not won over a single lap. They are won over race distance. Always to play for, it's only the first lap. So I thought, right, get into the rhythm, watch the guys in front, they're going to be fighting one another, they're on cold tyres still as we come towards the end of the first lap, and the tyres will be up to heat and up to speed now. And I'm following the slipstream of the GTR in front, meaning I've got a bit more speed going down the straights here, so I'm not going to be falling back compared to their advantage in straight line speed. Just come onto the second lap and start to build up that consistency and try to close the gap through being a consistent driver. So we're going to turn 1 once again, and we can see that the GTR is right up the backside of the Lamborghini, and we can see in our rear view mirror and the timings on the left hand side of the screen that 5th place is now 2 seconds down the road. Forget about 5th place, they don't exist. So now going up the hill, let's get a cleaner run through this section this time. So turns 2 and 3, clean. Turn 4 here, clean, riding over the curb, going up into 5, and then heading up towards turn 6, going down the hill very shortly. So in the purple sector for sector 1. And as we come into turn 6 here, you can see that the Nissan GTR and the Lamborghini are side by side. There's a little bit of contact which causes the Lamborghini to go a bit further out, but they get it under control. The Nissan backs out by the looks of things, and with that contact that means these guys are not charging off, and I'm starting to gain on both of them now as we go down to the chicane here. And because the amount of pressure that's being applied to the Lamborghini, it looks like they get a bit deep going into the chicane. The Nissan gets a very good line through the chicane, but they're blocking one another, they're defending and fighting against one another, which means I get an excellent run through the chicane section, and I go charging up the hill. I take third back off the GTR as we go into turn 10 here. Now am I going to make a move in turn 11? Yet looks as though the Lamborghini's not defending. Let's go up the inside and take the place back as we get a wonderful cutting on the corner there, keeping it tight to the apex, and now we've got second back as the Nissan GTR follows us through on the inside to pick up third place. So the Lamborghini down to 4th now, and we come through turns 12 and 13 here to come towards the end of the lap. What am I thinking at this point? Well, I was quite jubilant inside, thinking to myself that was a sweet move, but now we've got to maintain second place, and the problem is, now that we've got into second place, again we're at the whim of the fact that 2 guys behind, powerful cars, have both got the slipstream, and you're going to see that as we come down the straight here to begin lap number 3. And that GTR is going to be charging up our backside very quickly. The timing has already dropped down to 0.4 of a second, 0.3 of a second. They're getting closer and closer as we go up into turn 1. They take a little peek on the inside, but they're not going to go for it at this point. And now just got to get that consistency, that rhythm going, because I felt based on qualifying and what I've seen so far that I was the smoother driver over a good number of laps rather than just a single lap. They may have had the speed to catch me on the straights, but I could pull away from them just by being the smoother player, or sorry, smoother driver through all the technical sections and bringing the entire lap together. So we'll just have to see how it goes as we go down to turn 6 at this point, and we can see that the Nissan GTR is too far back to make a move, so just gradually braking into turn 6, getting a little bit wide, but I'm able to manage it and get the car tucked in very nicely as we come out turn 6. The GTR comes out a little bit, but it's tucking right in behind our slipstream, so they're losing no real time whatsoever. Anytime they're losing, they're regaining through the fact they're in our slipstream as we come down to the chicane now. Can we get a clean run through here? Missing the apex at turn 7, cut across the apex of turn 8, and then getting onto the curb at turn 9. You're allowed to cut the chicane, albeit if you cut it too much you'd end up picking the penalty, so getting that sweet cut across all 3 chicanes was the overall target. As we come down to turn 11 now, we can see the GTR is getting very close to our backside but doesn't go for the move. I was expecting them not to make the move despite the fact they did make that excellent lunge on the first lap, because I thought they were going to be a bit more methodical after getting a little bit bullish with the Lamborghini earlier on. So at this point I'm just expecting them, if they get within say 3/10 of a second coming into a corner, then it's most likely they'll go for a move, but otherwise just see how they react in the rear view mirror as we go into each corner and manage that distance to them, looking on the left hand side of the screen in terms of that timing, as we get a much cleaner exit here through turn number 14 to end lap number 3. And whilst the GTR is now catching us in our slipstream, as occurred previously and time again, you're going to see that because we've got that better drive out of turn 14, they're not really a threat this time as we come up into turn 1 for the 4th time. Now remember that Mercedes earlier, we'll look at the times on the left hand side of your screen and you can see they're already almost 7 seconds away. Again, forget about them, they're going to win this race, there's no spoilers there. But anyway, as we come up the hill here, turns 2, 3, 4 and 5, we're going to get another clean run through here, riding across the curves, making sure not to hit the edge of the curb because otherwise that would bounce the car, particularly on turn 5. If you bounce the car, you lost a lot of time. And as we come down into turn 6 at this point, we can see that GTR is close. They're looking down the inside here. I get a little bit wide going in, but because I get wide, I bring the throttle in gradually and I'm able to manage my position on the track, get the nose to tuck in towards the exit of the corner, and that means I get a wonderful exit out of the corner. I'm able to manage that gap to the GTR just enough as we come down to the chicane, and it looks as though they've got a bit too much distance to make a move on us. So as we come through the chicane here, I get a bit wide, but the GTR does the same, going into turn 7, clean it up through 8 and 9, and that means we pulled the gap out now to just shy of 0.6 of a second, and they're gaining once again as we go up the hill, turn 10, and then down into turn 11 here, another wonderful hairpin manoeuvre. And as we come through in second gear, we can see that GTR is not really gaining at this point because we're getting that consistency through all the tighter corners as the gap's now at 0.6 once again. Our lap pace is decent at the moment, but at the same time, ideally I would have been aiming for high 141s, that was my practice times, but because I'm so focused on keeping it as clean as possible when dealing with the GTR and making sure they're not going to make a lunge up the inside or I'm ready to defend, as a result I'm doing 142s, but still the consistency is there based on our race pace so far. Let's see if we can keep it consistent as we come to the end of lap number 4. As we come down the straight this time as well, note that gap's just a little bit greater, which means that slipstream effect is not really benefiting the GTR enough for them to get close to us as we go into turn 1. And if we can maintain this rhythm at the moment, with our last lap being a 142.5 and the previous two being 142.2s, then we could be on to breaking the slipstream gap between myself and the GTR if we can get it to a second. At the moment it's 7/10, and as we go up the hill here, it's expanding just a little bit, but as we come into turn number 4 and then up into 5, it looks as though that gap's starting to contract very gradually. But as we come over the brow of the hill here and down towards turn 6, it's good enough now that we can take a better line through turn 6. We don't have to take as wide a line now. We can just sync it up, we can collect the car, get the nose to suck in on the corner as we exit and hit the throttle hard and go charging down the hill now towards the chicane at turn 7 for the 5th time. Now as we're doing this, I'm looking at my tyre wear on the bottom left hand corner of my screen and I'm thinking to myself, right, keep in mind that the tyres are starting to show a little bit of wear, and one thing I found exceptional with the NSX compared to the BMW was the fact that the tyre wear on this car felt much nicer once the tyres have started to get into the zone. So you can see now that I've got roughly on the front right tyre in particular, as I go for a defensive line here in dealing with the GTR who got a very smooth run out of the chicane into 11. Taking that defensive line, it has cost me a bit of time. The GTR's right on my backside, but there's no room for them to make a manoeuvre into 12 or 13 here. It's a very tight section in terms of racing line. It's a very difficult one to make an overtake on. So I felt safe there as we go into 14 now. Got a decent run out of there, albeit the GTR is right up our backside, and we will shortly be switching over to the replay camera to give you an indication of just how close that GTR is, because they got such a smooth run through the chicane, turn 7 through to 9 on lap number 5, that as a result they've brought that time down and now they're right in our slipstream as we begin lap number 6, and they're going to put us under a lot of pressure throughout the course of this lap. So let's go to that replay camera and show you the pressure at a distance. So as we go into turn 1 then, you can see the GTR doesn't get as clean a line through the corner, but they'll make up for that by getting on the power a little bit early because they went deeper and brought the car under control. And as we go up the hill now, you can see that speed advantage plus the slipstream advantage really coming into effect for the GTR as we both cleanly make our way through the uphill section here and getting towards the brow of the hill. I'm thinking, right, that GTR is going to go for a move surely. So I go to the inside line and the GTR does get in front of me as we go round turn number 6 here, but because I've got the inside line, I'm making that GTR work for it much like the Lamborghini earlier, and rather than cut back in to get into the slipstream and onto the inside line, you see the GTR actually rides it all the way out, and that cost him just a tiny bit of time and enough to give me a bit of safety as we go down the hill towards the chicane at turn 7. They take a peek, but they tuck back in, realising there's not the opportunity to do it this time because I've got a lot more speed in the car compared to when they made the move on lap 1. And I get a much cleaner exit out of the chicane there, and we can now see as we go up the hill towards turns 10 and 11 that GTR's just fallen back a little bit. The Lamborghini's also in the fight still, about a second off of the GTR I reckon at this point. As we go through turn 10 here, we just got to get in nice and tight on the apex, nice and smooth through the corner, and now going down the hill, so that was turn 11, going down the hill towards turns 12 and 13. Just keeping this smoothness going, and the NSX is doing this very well with regards to smoothness, and I'll come back to that in the whole concept of tyre wear, and I'll interrupt it and cut that off a bit. As we come towards the end of the laps, the turn number 14, just getting it nice and tight on the apex here, making sure not to touch the curb because otherwise that will cause the car to start leaning out towards the back, and that will cause the car to potentially start spinning. And instead, as we come down the straight to complete the lap, only 2 laps to go if I remember correctly, and that GTR has fallen back a bit now, and looking at the timing, and we can see that gap has opened up to 8 tenths because we had such a smooth lap compared to the GTR over the course of the lap's distance rather than that open section where they were right up our backside. So coming back to the concept of tyre wear and consistency then, if you look in the bottom left hand corner of your screen, you can see that the tyres right now are holding in a really nice position in terms of available tyre, while the front right and the rear right both being in the region of approximately 75 to 80%, and that's what I found with the NSX was a key strength, that once the tyres had shown a little bit of wear, they really held on to their grip for a good number of laps before they really started to fall off, unlike the BMW where it seemed to be this consistent but annoying decrease in tyre availability over the course of each lap. And so I really used this to my advantage, I felt, over the course of this race, knowing that by the time I got into laps 5, 6 and 7, that tyre wear would be a factor, but at the same time the car would hold on just a little bit longer, so that way as I go through lap number 7 and I start to fall away from that peak of tyre performance and it starts to drop below, say, the 75% mark, then I'd be ready to start managing the tyres a little bit more on the high speed corners, making sure not to overdrive the car. And if we look on the right hand side of our screen right now in terms of lap times, you can see all of my laps bar the opening lap have all been at 142s of some description. Typically in the region of 142.5, if not lower, and that's the consistency of this car really shining. That's what I absolutely loved about this car around this circuit. As we get the back end out a little bit going over the bump there at turn 13, and the problem with the curb there at turn 13 is if you decide to try and launch the car over the curb, what would end up happening is it kick the back of the car out, especially if you got on the power early, and that costs you a lot of time and put some additional tyre wear in the rear right tyre of the car. I mean that you really had to manage that corner carefully. And sometimes you'll see that I actually come down to the corner having lifted the throttle off and getting on the brakes early and just letting the car gradually graze the curb and roll through into turn 13 in order to avoid skidding and sending the back end out. As we're on the final lap now, we can see the gap between myself and the GTI has expanded to almost 1.5 seconds. So at this point what I'm thinking is don't back off completely, but just turn the dial down a little bit, turn it down from 100% to 90%. All we've got to do is manage that gap, drive a consistent lap and make sure we don't make any mistakes, which at the moment we haven't really made any mistakes bar the incident on turn number 4 on lap number 1, but other than that we've driven a smooth race by the looks of things, and all we've got to do now is bring it home. First place has driven a fantastic race as well, with them being 13 seconds ahead of myself, but forget about them. The GTR's 1.3 seconds and gradually closing, but very gradually. It looks as though tyre wear may be a little bit of a factor for them as well. So as we go through the chicane here at turn 7, you know, I don't try to launch myself over the chicane, because one thing I found was in my enthusiasm for sometimes throwing the car over the curves at the chicanes, so turns 7 and 8 in particular, I'd end up getting on the power too early, and that caused the back end of the car to swing out, and that actually cost me a huge amount of time going into turn 9. As we can see, the GTR really brakes light going into turn 11 there, perhaps fancying a last ditch move, but alternatively they could have forgotten their braking point, as can happen. I've done it previously, but we're able to make sure they don't get close enough to affect a pass. And as we come through turn 13 here, you see I take it nice and smooth through 13, don't do anything silly in riding over the curb of 13, and now just one corner separates us from second place. Just bring it through nicely, keep it nice and tight to the corner here, and now we get on the power as usual, drive it straight, drive it towards the finish line, and bring the Honda NSX home in a successful second place. As soon as this race ended, I couldn't help but jump up and down in joy, in the fact that this was an absolutely fantastic race, at least in my opinion. I lost 2 places in the opening lap, got them back a lap later, and then afterwards withstood the pressure of the Nissan GTR for the entire rest of the race. And it was an experience that I hadn't been used to before, the fact that I had a driver constantly hounding me, constantly on my 6, getting ready to potentially make a move, and in my slipstream knowing that I could never really get away from them on the straights, and I really had to drive the car consistently, particularly through the technical sections, to try and keep the Nissan GTR just out of arm's reach for making a potential pass. And I'll definitely be taking that experience to the 3rd race at the Circuit de la Sarthe this coming Saturday when we move back to the Group 3 cars. With that, thank you for watching. If you did enjoy this video, be sure to leave a like, comment or subscribe for future episodes. As always, I've been TX141, and until next time, take care.